All right, we're going to get things started off here with some updates and some just refresher of FERPA and what we were doing here at Fairfield to make sure that we're in compliance with the laws that are being set up here. So, looking at first, what is FERPA? It is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It was established in 1974. It's a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student education records. And it applies to all educational agencies and institutions that receive funds from anything under the Secretary of Education. So we do fall under it being a public school, and anybody else that does receive funding from the United States Department of Education. So this does protect the students and the parents. It gives parents certain rights to their children's education records that are maintained by us. Parents are also granted rights on behalf of their children. Those rights do transfer when a child turns 18 or they start to attend a post-secondary institution. The parents and students, depending on the age of the student, do have the right to deny access to people outside of the school system, with a few exceptions. There is a process of complaint to correct errors or make an amendment, which might include having a hearing, and the students and parents have the right to opt out of military recruitment that they use educational records for. So in looking at the rights, what are educational records? This prevents sharing information on a student's educational record directly related to a student. And these are things maintained by a school like grades, discipline reports, immunization, health records, attendance, and the list goes on. So these educational records cannot be shared with anybody outside of the district without written consent from the parents or the students, depending on the age of the student. And also looking at directory information under FERPA, schools may disclose directory information to certain parties, and this information is something that would not generally be considered harmful to the individual. Things like name, address, phone number, birthday, and the list goes on. Some depending on where you look at in the research, some places say place of birth, grade, level. Some of those things are a little bit more invasive, but overall, those things are usually shared as directory information. So now looking at identifiable, what is it? It includes direct and indirect identifiers. A direct would be, of course, your social security, student name, birth certificate, those type of things. And indirect would be place of birth and mother's maiden name. So all this can be confusing. It's very simple. You have all this information coming in to you as a teacher, as a school employee. Assume that all information related to a student is part of their educational record. Do not disclose information without written consent. And when in doubt, ask your administration. Very simple. Okay, if you have a request from a parent about something like this, when in doubt, come to us. We'll lead you in the right direction, or we'll try to find out the correct answer through our legal attorneys and those type of things. So now looking at your classroom and what you can do, be cautious of the technology that you're using. If the program is having students put in personal information, be a little wary of that unless it is something that the district has paid for and has licensing for up front. Keep student data safe and secure, grades, those type of things. If you don't leave your laptop wide open, lock down things to ensure that other people cannot get onto it. Be diligent on social media, and also be careful who you talk to and what you talk about. Sharing something about an educational record could get you in trouble if you're communicating those things outside of the district or with other teachers. If you do have somebody that is trying to access a record, communicate with the parents about the educational record and what is allowed. Try to know the legal guardian of the students. And if you do not know, again, contact administration at all costs. Moving forward to some, I guess, tricky things in the law with immigration and what school resource officers are allowed and what they are allowed not to do. SROs may be considered as school officials, so they do fall under the FERPA laws. So if they come into a situation of knowing that a family is here undocumented or illegally, they are not required to turn the students or the family into ICE. It gets kind of tricky because sometimes if it's a off-duty police officer, or if it's an actual law enforcement officer that works just with the school, it gets tricky to determine if he is a school official or not. So it is suggested that a memo of understanding should be established between the district and law enforcement to determine what their role is in the school. Also, with FERPA and ICE, no exemption for ICE to have access to student records, so they cannot come in without a court order or subpoena and demand to see the educational records of a student if they suspect that they are here illegally. School may disclose if the health or safety is of concern to that student. So there are certain circumstances where that can be allowed. And then looking also kind of with this surveillance cameras, going with kind of what with law enforcement, 80% of schools now use cameras. That is up significantly in the past 20 years. There is some cases out there of the Fourth Amendment, whether it's being impeded on their constitutional rights of being filmed, and usually those, when they are being filmed, it's at common places where they could be seen by multiple people in the hallway, outside, those type of things. Of course, there is none in bathrooms and locker rooms and things like that. And if requested, footage may be released to parents, especially if there's like a fight and they want to see what happened. Those things can be given to parents, but sometimes you have to go through and do some editing to block other students that may be in there. And law enforcement too may see it, but it is an educational record, so sometimes you have to have written consent to be able to give that to law enforcement. Moving on to data, this is where a lot of this comes in. It's becoming more and more difficult with technology and all the software programs that we have on computers to protect student data. If you think about in your typical days, students and teachers create large amounts of electronic data about themselves. There's very little traditional paper in the records that are kept. Everything is sometimes online in a Google Drive, in a shared drive, something like that. And we have to make sure that we are managing the data very appropriately. So looking at the management, we have a clear policy of when to archive or destroy data. FERPA does not require a time limit on student data, but when looking at certain educational records that can be destroyed after a certain amount of time, once they've graduated, they don't need all the educational record, maybe just transcript, but look at how to destruct that data, whether to clear it out of the software, out of the computer, out of the hard drive, whether to purge it, and then whether to destroy it. Destroy is usually your paper methods of burning or shredding, to get rid of some of the information in a student's folder. So looking at the closing, there is a complaint process, and it is filed through the Family Privacy Compliance Office. Most of them that are complaints are filed or to gain access to or amend educational records. Might be something about a grade or discipline referrals, those type of things that they may want to change. Also, there is a few complaints about having accidental exposure to the educational record, and usually the department will work with the institutions to try to bring them to compliance instead of just slapping down restrictions and other things like that. And then here, looking at FERPA at our school, if you look in our student handbook on page 24 and 25, it does go over a lot of the information that I just presented to you here. You have to have prior written consent for disclosure. There's information about what is directory information, and then there is disclosure without consent is permitted by law section of things that we can submit. But usually any educational record stuff that we have the release form for parents to sign when we're sending it to another school or another district. So we are covered in that because parents usually sign to give that out. And then there is a section in the staff handbook on page 8 that goes into documentation and keeping those things safe and secure, so things that you have about students, about their grades and things like that, are not getting out to people that should not be seeing them. So under the FERPA Act, there is a lot of questions, and I want to re-emphasize to, if you have a question about anything, about a parent asking you if they can have something, contact administration. We have a great legal team that we can lean on at KSB to help guide us if we don't know. So please contact administration. And here's a lot of the research. I will share this with you that you can read on. It has some a very good Q&A in some of these that if you don't know, you can go and read it. It's got some pretty good information. So thank you, and I'll take any questions about FERPA now.